Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive with me.
And me.
And this time, we are going somewhere you might not expect.
Yeah.
We're diving into a Year 6 UK curriculum document
Ooh.
about citizenship.
Okay.
So you might be thinking Year 6.
Right.
Isn't that a bit basic for us?
Yeah, a little young.
But trust me, these fundamental concepts that they lay out for kids can really spark some insightful conversations.
Yeah.
For adults, too.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to unpack some of these deceptively simple definitions
Okay.
and just see where they lead us.
That's good.
All right, so let's just jump right in.
Yeah.
The first one that they talk about is concern.
Okay.
And they define it as something that makes you feel worried or anxious, which I think we can all relate to.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how does a personal concern like that become something that's shared by a community?
That's such a great question. And that's where I think the link to citizenship really comes in. Because if you think about it, shared concerns, they can unite people and they can drive them to act together.
Yeah.
The document actually says we can be concerned about certain people or issues and we can take action to help.
So it's not just about, sitting there and stewing about it.
Right.
It's about actually channeling that worry into something productive.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's a key part of being an active citizen. If we think about climate change, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
What started as individual concerns about the environment have really evolved into this global movement that is demanding systemic change.
Absolutely. Okay, so that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Let's move on to another topic that they bring up, which is discrimination.
Okay.
They define discrimination as treating someone differently because of certain factors. And again, that sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But obviously, this is a very complex issue.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is where the concept of protected characteristics comes into play. So these are characteristics like your age or your sex, your race, your religion.
Right.
That are actually outlined in the Equality Act.
Okay.
And basically they say that these things should never be grounds for unfair treatment.
Okay, so the document emphasizes the importance of challenging discrimination.
Yeah.
But wisely adds we must not put ourselves or others in danger to do so.
Right.
So that brings up kind of a tough question.
Yeah.
How do we balance, standing up for what's right and speaking up against injustice with also keeping ourselves and others safe?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I think sometimes the safest course of action might be to just educate yourself.
Yeah.
Raise awareness or support the organizations that are fighting discrimination.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there are so many of those organizations out there doing great work.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
We talk about environment, which they define as the local surroundings or place a person lives or works in.
Right.
Which, again, feels a little bit basic.
Yeah, a little bit straightforward.
But then they go on to talk about something that I wasn't really expecting.
Food.
Food.
Interesting.
Yeah, they bring up food.
Okay.
And they talk about how individuals and governments can make changes around food to help the environment.
Right.
Which I think is a really interesting connection.
Yeah, definitely. And they even say, the food that we choose to eat has an impact too.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of a reminder that even those small everyday choices that we're making are all connected to these larger environmental systems.
So it's not just about, what the government is doing or what big corporations are doing. It's also about individual responsibility.
Absolutely. And I think both of those things play a really important role.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on.
Yeah.
They also talk about government and the prime minister.
Okay.
And they define government as makes decisions for the country and prime minister as leads the government. So very kid-friendly definitions.
Yeah.
But obviously it's a lot more complicated than that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the source goes on to give this really simplified overview of the UK government structure.
Okay.
So they say that basically the prime minister appoints ministers from among the members of parliament, who are also known as MPs.
Right.
And each of these ministers is responsible for a certain area.
Okay.
Like you might have the Minister of Education or the Minister of Health.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So thinking back to concern for a second.
Yeah.
What are some examples of concerns that a government might address?
Well, they might address things like healthcare and education.
Yeah.
Economic policy, national security, a whole range of things, really.
Okay.
And how do citizens make their voices heard on those issues?
Yeah, how do we make the government listen?
Right. Well, there are all sorts of ways that people can do that.
Yeah.
They can vote in elections.
Gross.
They can participate in protests.
Yeah.
They can contact their MPs. They can just engage in public discourse.
Okay, so lots of different avenues.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of global systems, let's talk about the UN.
Okay, the United Nations.
Yes, the UN.
Mm-hmm.
The document describes it as working towards international peace and security, human rights, and better standards of living.
Right.
Pretty ambitious goals.
Yeah, huge.
So do you think the UN is actually effective?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And I think it's a complex one because, on the one hand, the UN has played this key role in peacekeeping missions and humanitarian aid. And it's also helped to set these international standards for human rights.
Right.
But it also faces a lot of limitations.
Yeah.
Like, it has this really bureaucratic structure, and it can be really hard for all of those different countries with all of their different interests to come to an agreement.
Right. Especially when there are so many countries involved.
Exactly. Yeah. So there are definitely some examples where the UN has struggled to make a real impact.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of the ongoing Syrian conflict, for example.
Right.
Where, their role has been criticized for not being able to effectively protect civilians or, really broker a lasting peace.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag for sure.
Yeah, there's successes, and then there are also areas where they struggle.
Yeah.
Okay, so the document goes on to talk about human rights.
Okay.
They define human rights as specific rights, which belong to every person. Very powerful idea.
Yeah, it is.
But do you think it really holds true everywhere for everyone?
I wish I could say yes, but unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
Well, the idea of universal human rights is like this guiding principle.
Yeah.
The reality is that we see violations all the time. In fact, the document even uses the right to education as an example.
Okay.
Saying that there are millions of children around the world who are denied this.
Right, because of things like poverty and conflict and discrimination.
Exactly.
So I guess that brings up another kind of challenging question.
Yeah.
What is our responsibility as citizens to uphold human rights, both locally and globally?
That's something I think we all need to think about.
Yeah.
Because do we have this moral obligation to advocate for human rights, even in situations where we might not be directly affected? Yeah. And if so, what can we do about it?
What actions can we take to actually make a difference?
Right.
Tough questions.
Yeah, they are.
But important ones.
For sure.
Okay. Moving on.
Yeah.
To prejudice.
Okay.
They define prejudice as making assumptions about someone based on certain information. I think we've all probably been guilty of this at some point.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We all make these snap judgments about people based on things like how they look or what they're wearing or how they talk.
Yeah. And it's important to recognize those biases in ourselves.
Absolutely.
And challenge them.
Yeah.
So how is prejudice different from discrimination?
So prejudice is like the attitude or the belief.
Okay.
While discrimination is the action.
Okay.
So, like, if prejudice is thinking negatively about someone because of their race, discrimination would be like refusing to hire them for a job because of that.
Okay.
And again, that links back to those protected characteristics.
Right.
It's saying that we shouldn't treat people differently because of those things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow, we've covered so much ground here.
I know, right?
From concern to discrimination to the complexities of the environment and government and human rights.
It's amazing.
Who knew that a Year 6 document could be so thought-provoking?
I know. It really is fascinating how these simple concepts that are designed for kids can actually spark these really nuanced conversations about being a citizen in this really complex world.
Absolutely. Okay, so as we wrap up, here's one final thought.
Okay.
If this curriculum is meant to prepare young people for their role in society, what do you think good citizenship actually looks like in today's world?
That's a great question, and I think there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
But maybe it's about things like understanding our rights and responsibilities and engaging critically with systems of power and taking action on the issues that we care about.
Yeah.
And recognizing that we're all connected to these local and global communities.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Into the surprisingly complex world of citizenship.
Yeah, who knew?
We hope you enjoyed it.
We did.
And we encourage you to keep exploring these concepts.
Yeah, keep thinking, keep learning.
Because even the most basic definitions can lead to deeper understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
And meaningful action.
Yeah.
Thanks again for listening.
See you next time.